Now I'm going to go through the different brushes that I have in the Artiste Professional range. Most of the brushes I've had for at least a couple of years, and I found them to be of really good quality for the price that you pay in Australian dollars compared to sort of some other cheaper brands or even a lot of other dearer brands that you can get. Now I'll start off with my favourite Artiste Professional brush, and it's actually the Stippling Brush. I've mentioned quite a few times I love stippling brushes to apply liquid foundations, mainly mousse foundations. Basically what I do with that, I'll just get the product, I'll stipple it across the face, and then I can actually buff it in to get a really smooth, flawless finish. Now the Stippling Brush is number 17 in the brush range, and $17.95. All these prices are in Australian dollars, and they're the recommended retail price. Now these ones come normally with a little sticker on here. It'll give the price, and they also have a little number and the actual brush name printed in white. But of course I've been using them for quite a while, so they've sort of worn off. I have another stippling brush because I love these brushes so much. This one I normally keep with the brush guide on, hence why it's a little bit more well formed than this one. This is a little bit domed out because I've been using it this week. But both of these brushes I've found over the last couple of years that I've had them have maintained their shape even without the brush guard and performed really well. Now when I did my very first overview of the brushes, I did have a lot of feedback from people commenting on either the brush was shedding or was sort of bleeding or both. Now with these brushes I've actually experienced both of those things, but with separate brushes. The first brush that I had actually shed quite a bit at the beginning. It doesn't really shed now. I get the odd here every now and again, but that's also with all the brushes that I own. It was really just the first few weeks that I had it when I was deep cleansing it. Now the other one that I had, I started using it a fair few months after I got the original one, and this one I actually experienced bleeding with. When I say bleeding, just the black dye was sort of coming off when I was actually washing it, and it probably stopped about the third time that I was actually deep cleansing it. And then it hasn't sort of bled since. Also with both the brushes, normally I deep cleanse once a week or twice a week, just depending on how I'm using them or the weather. But I always spot cleanse them with my cleansers each and every time I use them. I found there was no dye transference whatsoever, just the foundation when I was spot cleaning the brushes. And I use a range of different spot cleansers. I have about 5 different types of brush cleansers that I use, but the Artiste Professional one looks like that. And it's almost identical in the packaging and even the printing on this as the Cosmetica one that's available at Target. So that's the Artiste one. It's mainly just alcohol and fragrance. But that's number 17, the Stippling Brush. Just to compare it maybe to some other brushes, I do not own a MAC stippling brush. I only have a few MAC brushes because they're far too expensive in Australia. But I have a Sigma one just to compare it to the sort of handle. For example, if we just sort of line it up with the bristles, you can sort of see the length difference. But the actual Artiste Professional one is a little bit thicker. The brush handle is a little bit thicker. I've also got an Elf one, for example, if we line that up. Again, the Artiste Professional one is shorter handled. But if we grab, say, something, this is the Sigma Travel Brush. It's actually fairly the same length. But the Artiste Professional one is much denser than the Sigma Travel one. The Artiste one's more like a travel size handle compared to some of the other brands, and probably a little bit more convenient for taking around. The next brush I'll mention, which I showed before, this is the number 1 concealer brush. It's actually my favourite concealer brush that I use it basically every day when I'm not sort of trying to change up and use my other concealer brushes. It's a synthetic bristled one. It's very, very soft, but I love how it's always kept its shape. I've never seen it shed. I'm sure that it has, but it's got a really nice, well defined shape to it. And this one is recommended retail is $12.95. Never had any issues with the brush or the application, and I normally use it to apply my liquid correctors and concealers that are under my eye area and around my nose area if necessary. Next one is the number 2. This is the Point Concealer Brush, and recommended retail is $11.95 for this. Again, quite a fine point to that one. Also synthetic bristles, very soft. I haven't had any issues with the actual bristles, no dye or any transference there. This is for my HD cream sort of foundations to sort of apply or correctors or concealers to the face. And again, it's my favourite point concealer brush for more of those sort of finer areas, or if I really need to get into some sort of areas around the face. The Artiste Professional range also have a lot of different applicators, sponges, tools. I don't own any of those ones except for little mascara sort of brushes or mascara wands. These are $3.95. Oh, actually just bent the tip there. Of course you can keep it straight, that's not how it comes, but I sort of bend it. I use this for my eyebrows if I'm using the eyebrow gel, or after I've feathered the eyebrow liner I use that on there, and then I can actually clean it and brush cleanse. I just dip it in and rinse it around. I quite like these because they're not as flimsy as some of the disposable ones that I have. This is probably one that I just keep cleaning, and then I can just sort of throw it out if necessary. Got a couple of these ones. One is a larger brush, it's number 23. This is the bronzer brush. Recommended retail is $19.95 for this one. So you can see it's quite a thick domed powder brush. Now this one, the bristles are very, very soft. They do feel as if they're natural, but again, I don't have any details on that. And very dense. Even though it says bronzer brush, I very rarely use it for bronzer unless it's quite a shimmery bronzer, and that I would sort of use on the sort of cheekbones and around here and the décolletage. I normally use this brush for my mineral foundations, my mineral powder. Denser and thicker, yet softer the bristles, the better, to get a good coating of the powder and work it into the face. So this is really good, I find, for mineral. I haven't actually had any bleeding with this one, which is why I thought the bristles were natural as opposed to synthetic. But then again, like I find with some of the brushes, some bleed and some don't. Also, as you can tell, quite a short, stubby little handle. Sometimes it is a little bit hard to hold. I find it is quite large to use, but still a really, really nice. Another one is number 19. This is the Contour Blush Brush. Hope you can see that one's actually got quite a flat top to it, and it's actually kept its shape fairly well. I've had this for a couple of years, and I generally don't have a brush guard on it. I actually find with the brush guards, as they get a little bit older, they get a little bit scratchy, and they have actually scratched these black handle ones, or the paint, remove the paint off it. So normally I try not to use the brush guards on here, maybe just the plastic sleeves that come with some of them. And again, it feels like it's natural bristles. I haven't had any dye issues with this one. I've used this for matte bronzer, and I've also used it for highlighter as well as blushes. And normally I just sort of apply it under there. It gets into that shape really, really well. Also good for contouring across the face. And it's a really nice, soft, quite dense sort of brush. It picks up quite a bit of product, but not too much. And recommended retail is $17.95 for this one. And the next one is the number 18. This is the angle contour brush. Hopefully you can see that. It's quite a defined sort of angle to the brush. I've actually got two of these. One I keep in my makeup case trolley, and the other one I carry around with me to touch up blush if I need to during the day. You can see that's quite kept its shape quite well with the actual brush guard, and that's one that I don't use the brush guard on, but still keeps the shape fairly well. And the reason I carry this one around with me, again, it's got a really cute size. It's a really great size, as you can see, for travel, and also it's great, or at least the angle is quite good to get. You can do highlighter, you can do blush, you can do contouring, and they also feel like they're natural bristles, very, very soft. They're dark brown sort of bristles, and I haven't had any dye issues when washing this one or even spot cleansing. It's $14.95 for the angled brush. I do find with this one though, because it has that sort of angle, I find that when I actually deep cleanse it, it's best to sort of form it like that before I let it sort of dry naturally, just so it sort of keeps that shape in rather than splaying out, and you lose a little bit sort of harder sort of angle to the bristles. Some of the other smaller face brushes that I have. Okay, this one is number 34. This is the Contour Shadow Brush. You can see it's actually sort of a round from the top, but it's actually got quite a defined angle to it, so it's the Contour Shadow one. This recommended retail is $15.95 for this, and again it feels like it's natural bristles. I've never had any issues with any dye or any shedding. Any of the other ones that I've mentioned, I have had a little bit of shedding, which seems to sort of be natural with a lot of my brushes, but nothing significant, nothing unusual for the type of brush, and they all seem fairly well sort of domed. Like I don't get a lot of uneven hairs within the bristles. But with this one, I don't generally use it to sort of apply sort of eyeshadow, mainly because my eyes aren't necessarily well defined. I don't know if you can sort of tell on camera, because it just depends on how I'm actually looking at the camera. My eye type is actually fairly sort of hooded, the lid, sort of naturally. They're sort of more drooping, or have been drooping over the last sort of 10 years as I'm getting older. And I find if I'm trying to apply shadow, it's just way too much. I get way too sort of much pigment on. It's quite a large surface area, and it just doesn't quite work. But I find it's quite nice if I just want to do some buffing, buff some of the shadow, or soften up some of my crease, soften up some of the lines in there, or quite good for actually contouring, like if I'm applying sort of powder, like brown powder around my nose area to sort of contour my nose, or if I'm even applying highlighter powder sort of around the cheekbones or around the eyebrow bones. I find it actually good for that, but not so much for applying eyeshadow. The next brush is the All Over Shadow Brush, and it's number 31, and I actually have two of these. See that? Quite a large sort of bristled eyeshadow brush, and just sort of comparing it to my eye, for example, you can see it's actually fairly big. A lot of the other eyeshadow brushes that I have, I'll just grab one for example, this is the Bella Pierre one. You can hopefully you can sort of see the difference in the actual surface area you get to apply product on. Now, normally what I would do with this one is I would either apply sort of my base, my all over, as it says, the all over shadow. For example, if I'm trying to even up the colour and use this to apply the colour all over the lid, and it is super soft. It's really, really nice and soft, but you only need to tap it a little bit to get quite a bit of product. Do it all over, work it in. It's also good for sort of buffing, and I also find it really good too if I'm also applying sort of highlight powder as well. And because it picks up quite a bit of product. Again, feels like it's natural bristles. I've never had any dye issues with this one or any major shedding. And recommended retail for this brush is $15.95 Australian. Now again, with a lot of these ones, because you can get it at Priceline stores and selected Myer stores, I normally wait before I get them when there's sales on. And obviously you can get your Priceline points or your Myer 1 points for it. So that's again another good reason why I quite like these. Some people may be watching this and thinking there's other range within Australia like Beauty Essentials, QVS, which are even cheaper and more available. I do actually own some of those, but I do actually own some of those brushes. I find these are slightly better quality. Brush handles, the bristles. Okay, another eyeshadow brush is the rounded crease brush. Again, I have two of these. So I'll show you the difference. That's the all over, and that's the rounded crease brush. You can see the handle's a little bit bigger on the rounded crease brush, not too much though. Again, this is a very, very soft. These a little bit too soft, they almost feel synthetic, but I just love them up there. I found them great for working in the crease, for applying powder to the eyelid, basically doing anything on my eyelid that I want. I find them really, really soft, pick up quite a bit of pigment. Never had any sort of shedding or coloring issues since I've actually had these, and I've had these for a good couple of years. And recommended retail price for these are $12.95. Small brush that I have is the number 26. This is the flat liner brush. Let's see that. Sort of a pinky coloured, pinky pale white colour sort of bristle. And in comparison to the rounded crease brush, they're fairly the same sort of. It's just the concealer brush sort of reference that's a little bit bigger. Now the flat liner brush, I use it for a variety of things because the bristles feel synthetic and they're very, very soft. I've even used this to apply like highlight cream or any sort of illuminating creams in a corner. I've even used it as a concealer brush when washing my other concealer brushes. I've used this for eyeliner on the top and lower lid. I've used it to smudge eyeliner, both liquid and pencil. This one has quite a few different uses to it. And the recommended retail is $13.95 for this one. Again, I've had no issues with any major shedding, any dye transference, etc. And looks like the last brush I have. There's also a few different retractable brushes that the Artiste Professional range have. This one is the retractable blush brush. I have tried it as a blush brush, but generally I've used it just sort of to apply powder on my face, or any sort of setting powder or finishing powder. I find it quite good for that because it's not very dense for sort of my mineral powders, a little bit flimsy for my sort of blushes. I also prefer blush brushes or contour brushes that are angled or tapered. This one's just sort of slightly domed. Now this one, the bristles feel, can't actually tell, they actually feel like they're a mixture of synthetic and natural, but I didn't have any major bleeding with this brush. I have had a little bit of shedding. I do find, because, I don't know if you can see that, you get quite a few different hairs sort of sticking out, even though that this is like that, and you've got the lid there and you push it down. I think they probably get caught up a little bit in the side, so I have had them sort of fall out a little bit. So as far as a travel brush, it's still pretty good. It's nice and compact. It's $14.95 recommended retail, but I'd probably prefer it more just to sort of as a finishing brush for the face rather than as a blush brush. Overall thoughts on the range, the Artiste Professional brush range still remains my sort of favourite brush range, mainly because out of all the brushes that I have, I probably use more of the Artiste Professional range than some of my other ones. A close second is easily Sigma and Royal Langnickel. I love those brushes, and also ecotools, so it's kind of hard to distinguish second place, but I still, for the actual price value, I do like the Artiste Professional one. It is a shame though that information on the actual brand is a little bit limited. There's been quite a few different reviews via magazine and other beauty bloggers out there, as well as a few other people on YouTube, but I still find it odd that even though the brand's been around for a good couple of years, that the website's still not up and that none of the information is on the actual Manicare website. Again, those links are below. And if you own any of the brushes from the range, please give me your thoughts and feedback down below, any sort of favourites that you have in the range or any issues as well. It's always good to get the feedback, whether it be positive or negative. Again, thanks for watching and thanks for your support. Take care.